And
Thank
I am now recording, and hold on one moment, and I'm going to mute all, and I, okay. Bill, you are unmuted. You should be good.
you so much, Sally. Yes, hello, folks. Bill Walz. Just a little bit of introduction. Most of you probably know me, as Sally said, from my classes. My background, educated, practiced as a clinical psychologist for many years, but that hardly kind of says who I have ever been, and certainly who I am now. Also trained in cultural anthropology. My view around the issue of mental health, which has been my lifelong focus, what actually is mental health, um, along with my anthropological background, brought me to non-Western views of mental health, of consciousness. And probably 25 years ago, 30 years ago, really came to a place where I began to increasingly separate from identification as a psychologist into a teacher of consciousness and the vehicle of meditation as a pathway to mental health. And as most of you know, that comes about because I always had the curiosity that the mental health profession, the psychology that I was a member of, while it did a great job of categorization of mental illness, it didn't really seem to have any idea what mental health was. Really only addressing mental health as a relative absence of mental illness, and the practice of psychology and mental health as a management of neurosis when it gets completely dysfunctional and creates problems for a person and themselves. And I was interested in something much deeper than that, this notion of what is mental health. And that's what I'm going to be addressing today. We're going to have 4 sessions together. Today, the first one is going to be meditation as a necessary skill for basic mental health. Next week, we're going to go somewhere. This is just an area that I've really just started really examining and looking at. I, in fact, wrote a column for this month. Those of you who are on that list received that. It's about the notion of trauma looked at a much subtler level. And really, what is mindfulness and meditation, if not training ourselves to be able to look at life and our experience at subtler and deeper levels, but to look at the whole notion of trauma at a much deeper level than what we typically understand it as in post-traumatic stress disorder, and that as this entire shaping process into an idea of a person. It is really the creation of an ego identity when life is, and the experiences of life, society, culture, family, personal experience, and that are kind of like forging an identity, creating a shell of an ego. We'll be talking about that next week. The third week will be discovering the non-dual underpinning to our human existence. And that is that which opens us up into really true spiritual experience. What is spiritual experience? What is spirituality? And along with the topic today, for me, there is no such thing as mental health, psychological health, that does not include spiritual health. So again, what is spirituality? Spirituality is a living, felt sense of being connected into the fabric of life and into the wonder of life, and living from some place of amazement and compassion for life. Non-duality is that sense of connection, not only at an intellectual level, but at a felt sense level. And that'll be addressing the third week. Then the fourth week will be, again, I'm coming from a place of my training as a psychologist, as actually my undergraduate degree is a dual degree in sociology and anthropology. So I'm coming at this very much as a social scientist that also really includes political science. And we are in a political season. And so I'm going to address in our fourth session, the necessity of the spiritual and ethical underpinning through awakened consciousness that is necessary for human society to meet the challenges of the 21st century and capable of taking us into the 22nd century and beyond. So again, these are going to be Zoom meetings. We're going to Zoom through some very heavy topics, big topics. But I hope I can give you a taste and a flavor of them. And then maybe when we get around to having in-person classes again, or maybe I'll do a Zoom class for Ali along the way. That's what my classes are about. That's what my writing is about. And so I hope I am able to whet your thirst today, at least. So what is mental health? Mental health is an unshakable sense of balance, is it not? It is an okayness. It is confidence in our ability to handle life on life's terms, is it not? It is seeing things as they actually are. It is having one's sense of well-being arise from their own sense of beingness. What do I mean by beingness? Anybody who, and probably many of you who would be attending a session like this are familiar with Eckhart Tolle's work. And a lot of where I'm coming from and what I'm teaching very much parallels what Eckhart Tolle is teaching. Why? Because what Eckhart Tolle is teaching is basically a contemporization of Buddhist philosophy, psychology, ethics, cosmology, and that is exactly what I've been working on for many years. So beingness in Eckhart Tolle's terminology is that sense of, and as well as used in Buddhism and Zen, is this sense of who we are prior to society, culture, personal experience, family, creating an idea of a person that in these contexts we call ego, an ego identity. Our society is built around ego identity. Civilization is built around ego identity. What is ego identity? It is the unique human evolutionary capacity to abstract its experience out of nature. All of nature, every animal, every tree, all of nature exists within a perfect harmony that Buddhism refers to as Dharma. Human beings don't, yet we do. Ultimately, we do, and we'll talk about that in some future session. But we have this problem that we don't, because we abstract, because of this complex cerebral cortex, this complex brain that has evolved. The universe has evolved over 14.5 billion years. We abstract. We have this idea of our own individuality, our own individual separateness, not simply as a physical organism, but as a psychological entity. And from there, then we create levels and layers of psychological identity and entity and families and identity groups and societies and nations and football teams that we follow and political parties that we follow, and ultimately and eventually a split and a separation, an extremely tragic split and separation that takes place for humanity from nature itself. This gets into our fourth session, where we're going to really be talking about the consequences of that split and the need to heal that split if humanity actually is to have a future. All of mental health is about living and finding our way into that sense of harmony. So it is also an internalized sense of ethics. I believe ethics, and Buddhism believes ethics is a very important part to a person living a happy and healthy life. And I think any of us can look at our own experience and realize that when we are living in a violation of whatever our particular sense of ethics is, it is not possible for us to be comfortable with ourselves. It is not possible for us to be comfortable with other people. And so, in example, as a counselor, there are times when an issue like fidelity within a relationship comes up. And the issue of, you know, is it necessary for fidelity to be there, for there to be a healthy relationship, for there to be a healthy individual? And my answer inevitably is, I believe yes, and it has nothing to do with morality. It does have to do with mental health. It does have to be able to have the sense of living without contradiction and conflict in our lives, without trying to keep track of what lies we're telling, of trying to keep track of the places where we're out of ethical clarity in our lives. All of this has to do with mental health, and it ties very directly in with meditation. Why? Because meditation is training ourselves in self-knowledge. That's what it really is about. Now, all of you have lots of experiences with various kinds of meditation. I am teaching a variation, a personalization of Zen Buddhist meditation. Not in any way traditional Zen Buddhist meditation called Zazen, although sometimes I will make reference to Zazen, but in the very originating spirit of Zen. Zen came about as Buddhism traveled out of India, and every spiritual tradition, every religious tradition, every philosophical tradition is strongly colored by the culture of its orientation and its practice. And Buddhism, as it came out of India, was not very different in its complexity. Any of you who are students of religion know that Hinduism, which is the religion, world religion that is usually associated with India, is very complex, very, very, very complex. And the Buddhism that came out of India was likewise very, very complex. And it came into China, but Chinese culture is not complex the way Indian culture is. Chinese culture is very pragmatic, is very practical. And so when Buddhism came into China, it met an already existing long-standing tradition, spiritual tradition, ethical tradition, philosophical tradition in China known as Taoism, Taoism, which essentially parallels very much the foundational teaching of Buddhism, which is to realize that there is a harmony to the universe, which in Buddhism is referred to as Dharma, the same word that Taoism is, meaning the way. And with that, in China, this notion of how do we achieve this naturalness, how do we achieve this sense of harmony with the way life actually is, rather than the way that our abstracting brains cook it up into very, very crazy things. And the answer was sit. Just sit. Stop running all of the crazy programs of and the activity of your life, because that's what sustains and continues living in these unhealthy and unbalanced patterns. Stop. Sit. The entire story of the Buddha's awakening is one in which, after going through many, many forms of searching for ultimate reality into the nature of the human condition, he simply sat beneath a Bodhi tree. And so it is with Zen. Zen invites us to find our own Bodhi tree, to sit, to tune into that which is the most natural, our closest, most intimate connection with life and nature itself, our own breathing. To be able to focus, balance, harmonize, just as our own breathing is focused, balanced, in harmony. To quiet the mind by focusing at a very subtle and precise way into that which is a physical sensation, In the physical sensation, there is no talking in the mind. There is only the perception of the sensation. And so the mind naturally quiets. And with the breathing and with the focus on the breathing, the body naturally relaxes. And so we settle into a relaxed yet very alert and quiet consciousness. However, that abstracting mind does not like what we are doing. So it wants to reinsert itself. It wants to continue talking. It wants to continue distracting. And our practice, the Zen practice, is to simply notice how the mind keeps reasserting itself, the egoic mind keeps reasserting itself, how the egoic mind keeps imbalancing us. And as we notice, we bring our awareness back to our breathing. And as we bring our awareness back to the breathing, the balance reestablishes itself. And not only does the balance reestablish itself, but with repetition, we begin to be aware of that which is noticing. We begin to be aware of an entirely unnoticed dimension of our experience, although it is the very underpinning of our experience, and that is consciousness itself. That is awareness itself. And our meditation becomes a directing of awareness into how the body and mind that we have always identified as who we are, because this is what our culture teaches us, how this body and this mind and this personal identity and the attempts at connection in this world that is experienced through the ego as separate bits, both all of the elements of life, including other human being, bits of competing elements in the struggle for life. To see how all of that creates this disharmony, creates this anxiety, creates difficulty. And to be able to recognize that which sees this difficulty, that sees this disharmony, that sees the egoic mind disrupting the peace. That awareness is not subject to this disharmony. That awareness in itself, its basic faculty, is clarity, calmness, focus, peacefulness. And so a shifting of sense of self from being caught in mind and body that, oh, by the way, has awareness, turns around completely into the realization that who we are is awareness that has a body and a mind to engage the physical world and the complexities and the difficulties of the physical world. But we are not this body and mind. We are the clarity of this awareness. And so with this, Buddhist meditation recognizes three levels of meditation, of this healing meditation. The first level being just the capacity to train the mind in some stability, clarity, and calmness. This is referred to as shamatha, or peaceful abiding. This is where we begin our meditation, training the mind in some capacity to peacefully abide in the moment, rather than skittering off again back into remembering something out of the past, or anticipating something in the future, or concocting some scheme about how to get along in the world. To be able to settle peacefully into the moment as it is. And when we settle peacefully into the moment as it is, we begin experiencing our own mind, the insecurity of our mind. We may even begin realizing that if we happen to have a particular neurotic style that is anxious, we begin seeing how we're living behind a filter of anxiety. How basically mostly all that we're letting in is about what there is to be anxious in the world about. And mostly what we're putting back out into the world is about our anxiety. And if we're a depressed neurotic, if our particular style of being a little crazy is through depression, it's the same thing, that we're mostly taking in that which confirms our reasons to have some despondency about life. And what's coming out of us is that despondency. If anger is our way of managing this difficulty with our separateness, the same thing will be happening. And so as we strengthen that witnessing capacity of awareness, we begin to be able to realize these distortions in our own perception. And yet again, that which notices does not have those distortions. And we've entered into a second level of our training that's called vipassana, wisdom or insight. And ultimately, there's a third level. And this third level is, and we'll address that the fourth week, is this level of non-duality, samadhi, oneness, where rather than an intellectual idea that the world is a unity, we can begin to experience it for ourselves. So this zooming through, again, is a sense of what this form of meditation, inspired by Zen and by Buddhism, that I teach and I practice is about. Let's spend a few moments doing it. And so what I'd like you to do, what I always advise people to do, and this is heart of Buddhism, which is to realize Buddha is, the translation of the word Buddha means the awakened one. Buddhism is the practice, the study of awakening. Awakening into what? Awakening into our true nature, into our essential beingness. To realize Buddha is not this abstraction somewhere else. Buddha is within us. And so when we sit in meditation, to allow ourselves to manifest that Buddha within. You all have seen pictures of meditating Buddhas. I would ask that as we sit now, you allow your body as best you are able to take that visage, that posture. The sense of the earth beneath you, grounding you, and the heavens above you, inspiring you, and the body actually being a conduit between these two realms of heaven and earth. And focus into your breathing. With particular noticing of the sense of the exhalation. How there is a releasing of tension of body and mind. That is the ego tension with the exhalation. Following the breath, allowing any continued activity of the mind just to simply be a little background noise, quieting down as you are increasingly able to focus the energy of awareness into the sensation of your breathing, into the exhalation, lingering just a moment at the limit of the exhalation before the inhalation naturally occurs. Sitting, breathing, being, peaceful, present. Allowing the quiet to pervade you, fill you, nourish you. And take a deep breath. Give a long exhalation. Again, that sense of balance. Do not be so quick to reconstitute the idea of yourself. This person with their anxieties or their despondencies or their angers or their insecurities. Just linger in spacious presence. Realizing that in that spacious presence, you are healthy, whole, clear. This is what Buddhism would refer to as your true self. I would hope that you would also notice that if mental health has a feel to it, it is this. And it is exactly what has drawn me, that this is not getting lost in the labyrinths of our neuroses, trying to analyze and figure out where they come from and what might be done about them. It is bypassing them entirely to discover a healthy and whole person that already exists. Our journey into mindfulness, then, this is a term that my guess is that you've heard. I use these terms very particularly. Often meditation and mindfulness are used interchangeably, but I use them very particularly. That meditation is the turning of that eye of awareness inward to realize and learn the nature of human mind and consciousness. Mindfulness is the directing of that awareness into the world to develop a sense of harmony, connection, balance, insight as we function in the world. So how does meditation improve mental health? Well, certainly the calmness, the clarity, the focus increases our capacity for concentration. And these are all elements of that peaceful abiding dimension. It awakens awareness. As I said, it is to realize what is happening here. What have we activated? This dimension of human experience that our culture, even our psychologies or our religions pay practically no attention to, the realm of consciousness itself and how it individuates through a human being as awareness. And so we're awakening that who we are is awareness, that we're gaining insight into, and we are de-energizing our troublesome thoughts and emotions. We're balancing, this is important, we're really balancing the mind in ways that, again, our culture and our psychologies don't train us to, because we're awakening a capacity. Our Western psychologies deal with thoughts and emotions. It says practically nothing about our relationship to our sensory direct contact and relationship with the world, and very importantly, with our intuitive connection with the world, which really is the consciousness of awareness, that which connects us. These all have to do with the vipassana, the witnessing, the development of insight and wisdom. And this, of course, leads to an increasingly mentally healthy life, as well as, again, recognizing what place ethics plays in our having a balanced and healthy life. And then finally, in the deepening exploration of what this energy of consciousness is, there ultimately becomes the realization that we are touching the origin of the universe itself. We are touching the fabric of the universe itself, something that I like to emphasize. It is so exciting to be alive at a time when Western science, that which had divided human experience from nature and consciousness, now stands tremblingly with quantum theory, quantum experience, physics, recognizing that the very substratum of the universe is unity and quite possibly consciousness itself. This is what this meditation can bring to us. I hope you find value in it. We have a few minutes left. I want to know if what I've said has elicited any questions or sharings that anyone would like to engage in. So you can go ahead and unmute folks now, Sally.
Okay, people are now unmuted. In order to actually complete the process, you have to unmute yourself. So we have about 3 minutes left.
So anybody who's saying that stimulated a question that hopefully, again, I can zoom a clarification for. Anything? I must have been very clear.
I think you put us in peaceful abiding.
I'm so glad, Bob. It's so good to see you, old friend. Judy, hello, Judy, my dear friend. You had something? I thought I saw you raise your hand.
Just agreement, just agreement.
Just agreement.
That you were clear.
And Barbara. Hello, friends. Hello, friends.
So if anyone does come up with questions during the week, you can email them to me and I will pass them along, and we will try and get them addressed either in the program or through written communication. All right? And I think we're about to be cut off here. So thank you so much, Bill. Thank you all for joining us. This was a wonderful way to start our week.
Hope to see you next week when we will be addressing this issue of trauma. I think you'll find it very interesting. Have a wonderful, wonderful week, everyone.
Thank you, Bill and Sal.
Thank you so much.
Bye all. Bye all.
All right.
Bye.
Okay, when's the screen going to go away?
It keeps saying less than a minute.
I'm waiting for it to lock us out.
Less than a
Like
minute.
we could bet on it. Maybe they're going to give us extra time. Did they give us extra time?
They only do that the first few times, then if you with the basic Zoom.
No.
After that,
Sally, did you look at Google?
Not yet, but I will do that.